We're pretty much on the opposite ends of the globe, and yet we're having a conversation. I don't think it's that bad.
Oh, God, far out. There's a lot of pressure today. I should have put makeup on.
Welcome to episode 5 of Take It EV. Today's episode is going to be an interview with someone who's very famous for their super funny videos and their ability to convert a legacy car into an EV. Please welcome Kiwi EV. Briefly introduce yourself and tell us what do you have to do with all this EV stuff.
Okay, we'll start with the introduction. My name is Gavin Shoebridge. I was born in 1943. No, I've made all of that up. My name's Gavin. I'm infatuated with electric cars, all methods of transport, not just electric cars, but also internal combustion engine. But electric cars, obviously, they're the future. And back in 2007, after a decade of wanting to do it, I converted a car to electricity back during a time when no one had done anything like that, or it was just such a freak thing to do. And then years later, out came the Nissan Leaf and the Tesla Roadster and all and then of course the renaissance of electric cars began. And so now I've been following that intently ever since. In fact, I think my electric car obsession started back. Would have been back in the mid-80s. I can remember distinctly asking my dad for a go-kart. When all the other kids wanted go-karts, of course, when you're a kid, you wanted a go-kart. But I remember asking him specifically an electric one. And I don't know why, but I wanted an electric one, not a gas-powered one. So I'm guessing I was corrupted from an early age.
Have you ever driven anything electric, or was there anything about electric that kind of caught your attention?
No, that's the thing. I don't know. It's like, I was thinking about this the other day. You know how birds and cats and dogs and chimpanzees, they instinctively know how to fly or swim. It's built into their software. They just know. I think it was the same with me. It wasn't something I learned because, humans, we don't seem to have any real instinct. We have to learn how to swim and all that. But somehow I had this instinctual feeling ever since I was young that electric cars, I have to drive an electric method of transport. So I don't know, Sorry, this is the most bizarre story. It's instinctual.
So you weren't one of those kids that had a cool, poster of Lamborghini or Porsche or whatever on their door, or were you into cars when you were a child or a teenager?
Oh no, absolutely obsessed with cars. My dad used to have. He'd have unusual cars as well. He used to have a business he ran downstairs. He had an old Land Cruiser, and of course it wasn't used a lot. So I used to sit in there and sit in the driver's seat and pretend to change gear and pretend I'd make the car noises and everything. This is back when I'm like 12, and I was just obsessed with the idea of driving. I couldn't wait to drive. And I remember occasionally my uncle would allow me to sit on his lap, and I would be driving the car in the car park. It had power steering, so my little 9-year-old arms could manage the steering wheel, but it was an automatic, so I could just steer the car at low speed around an empty car park at night. And that was, for me, that was a thrill. So I've always been obsessed with cars. I've got 24 or 25 cars I've owned in my 38 years on the planet, which is far too many. But that gives you an idea of how obsessed I am with cars.
Interesting. Like I'm quite the opposite. I wasn't interested in cars at all until I was about 27 or 28, and I was pushed to do the driver's license, because I grew up in a town or a city with pretty decent public transportation, and I love to walk. I'm sort of a rambler, by nature. Mm-hmm. I just didn't care about cars, and then I remember doing my first sort of driving lesson, and it was on the where I grew up. What they would do is they would first teach you sort of in a closed environment. You would just go in the first gear, and just use clutch and brakes basically to propel yourself around. And I just loved it. But never before, I've just like you, I've been driven by uncles on their lap, and they would allow me to steer and everything. It just never caught with me. I just never had the bug to go and drive. I'd never cared for it. And then I did the driving myself, and all of a sudden I was like, wow, I love this stuff.
It is kind of addictive, isn't it? It's like, I guess it's probably like doing, I don't know, pseudoephedrine or whatever. What's the drug they do? Is it is it heroin? Yeah, that's a good example. It's like heroin, you know. You don't, if you've never tried heroin,
Don't
of course
do
I've
heroin,
never.
kids.
Well, of course, don't do heroin. But you know, I've never tried heroin. But I imagine that it must make you feel really good, and that's why you get addicted to it. It's the same with you know, cars, whether they're gas or electric. It's like you've been standing your whole life, and now you're finally sitting down. It just feels good, you know.
Yeah, I think I felt similar when I've got my first bike or bicycle. Just cycling, you know, as a kid, it was just such an amazing thing. And my dad was into mending bicycles and sort of you know, playing with them. So we always had a bicycle when I was a child, and then I mended them when I was sort of early teens. And I remember actually selling my computer for in exchange for a bicycle, and then selling the bicycle back to get another computer, which is, you know, another
you
story.
venture capitalist,
yeah.
well done.
Yeah, but yeah, interesting. Like, yeah, I'm always interested in knowing, you know, people's stories. Obviously, cars are just you know, means of transportation for most of the people, but origin stories are always fascinating.
Gosh, I remember I was so obsessed to have a car when I was a kid. I used to get if I had a big cardboard box, I'd sit in the box, you know, when I was 7 years old, and you know, Dad had a spare car battery sitting around, and I remember he bought an old Skoda, which, you know, it had died, as Skodas do, or at least they did back in those days when they're, you know, built in Czechoslovakia. They weren't the most reliable four-wheeled beasts, but
No.
I'd harvest the light bulbs out of the dead Skoda that was sitting outside, and I'd put holes in this cardboard box and get little wires and things, and I'd wire indicators and things to the box, and I'd, you know, connect the wire on off to make the indicator flash and all that, and pretend I was driving an actual car. And then a few years later, this is probably when I was about 13 or 14, I found a supermarket trolley sitting outside, neglected and lonely and looking terrified out on the road, and I thought, I can work with this. So I brought it home. It was somewhere on the street nearby, and we were in the suburbs, so there was no reason for a supermarket trolley to be there. But I brought the supermarket trolley home, and with a complicated series of rope and string, I managed to force the front wheels to steer somewhat.
Wow.
and then I sat in the supermarket trolley, and I think it was my brother who gave me a push onto the road, which was on a slight. It went downhill slightly, and then I picked up speed immensely. And at first, for the first 4 or 5 seconds, I'm thinking, yeah, I've got this. Unfortunately, I remember distinctly the string which guided the wheels came off in my hand, and my speed picked up, and I ended up careening into the back of a parked car which had some bull bars on the back. So no damage to the car. My trolley had a scuff, and I think that was the end of my trolley racing days. But I survived. I didn't break anything, thank God, but it shook me a bit. So
interesting.
Sorry, we really got off topic there.
There's loads of stories that I have about me cycling and, you know, getting bruised and it was awful. Some of the falls, just, you know.
What you said though is a good point. Getting, you know, tasting freedom in cars. This is one thing. While as much as I like public transport and it works great and I use it occasionally, it doesn't replace the feeling you get driving a vehicle. Public transport, as functional as it is, it can never replace the enjoyment of driving a car.
Well, yeah, I do love, you know, when I take a train or a bus, I love looking out the window instead of looking at my phone as a sort of, you know, sort of world watching sort of thing. But yeah, but like you say, there is something sort of natural about us being able to go where we want to go, and it's the same thing, you know, with walking, right? That's how we start.
Yeah.
And then we just want to go further and quicker, and to places like, you know, like we can't go just on our feet because it's either too hard or you know, whatever. Obviously, yeah, the roads are built for a reason. So anyway. But we're going completely like off the subject.
Yes, sorry, so carry on. Yep. I'm sorry, I have to warn you in advance. I expect this is going to happen a lot.
That's fine. I'm a rumbler as well. talking and walking as well. But that was my attempt at humor.
That's all right.
So like you said, you've converted a car, right?
Yeah.
Like, what made you? You mentioned the fact that you wanted to have an electric, mobility when you were a child. But what made you like decide to one day? Oh, I'm gonna. Did you own this car and you've decided to convert it, or was it like a project where you just took it? You said yourself, okay, I'm just going to buy a car and convert it. What's the story?
Exactly what you just said. I bought a car knowing that I wanted to convert it. I remember when I lived years and years ago, lived back in Australia, I'd even bought a Haynes manual I'd already chosen the rough sort of car I wanted to convert. It was an old Mitsubishi Mirage from the early 80s because I used to own one. And I bought the Haynes manual back in Australia to figure out how the car disassembles and all that. That's how ready I was. Then when I moved back to New Zealand back in 2006 or so, I thought, okay, why not? I've got a garage. Let's do it. So I went out and I bought an old Mitsubishi Treadia that was $180, I think, which is probably not worth that. But one step I skipped over. I was spurred on, like I'd always wanted to do this, but I was spurred on, like many people, by the movie Who Killed the Electric Car. And once I'd seen that, that's when I had to get off the couch, get in the garage, and really start converting a car. And there was very little information available at the time because only a handful of people had done it. For obvious reason, because the technology wasn't great. You had to use lead-acid batteries, so you could only ever go so far in a converted car back in those days. Because while lithium existed and nickel metal hydride existed, it was outrageously expensive. So you had with lead-acid batteries, you had a limit because it was weight. There was only so far you could go. You could say, well, what if I put in a ton of batteries? Well, I thought, if you put a ton of batteries in, that would theoretically give you a lot of range, but you're limited by the weight of the batteries. So it reaches a tipping point where no matter how many batteries you put in your car, you're never going to go past a certain range because you're trying to drag the weight of the batteries. It's like it's its own barrier, whereas lithium has unleashed an entire new realm of range possibilities for conversions. But now, what's the point? Because there are cars like the Nissan Leaf, which are going for dirt cheap. But yeah, at that time, there was very few people who had done conversions. It was freaks did that sort of stuff, so I was a very happy freak to do it. A great learning experience, and it got a lot of attention, and I ended up doing something which no one else had done at that point, documenting the entire process with videos, which turned out to be incredibly popular. I didn't realize. I've had some people I still meet today say, "Oh, I watched your videos 10 years ago. They got me interested in conversions," and I didn't really think I was doing anything to help others, but it turned out that it was a lot of people drew inspiration from those crazy videos.
Yeah, that's amazing. To think that you just decided to pick up a car one day and just convert it into an EV. Most people just don't do that sort of a thing. Like, what is your background? Are you sort of an engineer, or you're a tinkerer, or what is the?
I'm a breaker of things.
There's a bit of knowledge required to presumably, I don't know how high the voltages were in that car, but you still have a DC voltages, and
it could still slightly kill you if you did something wrong. But my background from around a decade was telecommunications, working for Telecom back when it was called Telecom. Now it's called Spark or Chorus or something. He's changing its name, but so I knew how wires worked. And when I was a kid, I used to take a little 9-volt battery and a little motor, and I'd join them together and watch things spin. But I couldn't tell you anything about microchips or anything. I just knew that positive goes to positive, negative goes to negative, or vice versa, or whatever. And
that knew enough not to kill yourself, basically.
Yeah, that's all you need to know. Really, the electric cars conversions are so simple. All the components you buy off the shelf. There are dozens of places which sell electric motors and then the converters and then the batteries, and you just join them together and you realize, oh, okay, so I need a 20 centimeter cable from there to there. So you write that down and you go and talk to a cable guy and say, hey, I need a 20 centimeter cable to join this battery to this battery, and he'll make it for you. Everything's just ready for you. You don't have to sit there, soldering component boards together. I mean, you can. There are people out there that are doing it, but for an electric car conversion, it's so easy. Everything's just plug and play.
Well, it is easy nowadays, thanks to people like yourself who documented the process and obviously enabled it, and inspires generations of people to do it. But was it so easy when you started?
It was still pretty easy back then because electric cars are really simple things. With a gas car, you've got fuel pumps and filters and oil filters and fuel lines and all this vacuum tubes and all this stuff, all this crazy nonsense. But with an electric car, you've got three main parts. You've got the motor, the batteries, and the controller. And then the rest of it's just little bits and pieces, like a couple of big fuses that just go in between the big cables somewhere in case something goes wrong. You've got a main contactor, which just switches on and off. You've got a couple of gauges, the amp meter and the voltmeter. And then what else? You've got a contactor that that closes the circuit when you turn the key, and that's pretty much it. That's all there is to wire in. There's no complicated circuitry, and all that stuff that I mentioned, the ammeter and the voltmeter, for example, they just tap into the existing circuit. You don't even have to drill any special holes. It's just run a cable to the dashboard and glue the little meter on it, and that's it. It really is that easy.
You make it sound so easy. It almost sounds like Legos.
It is. That's a great example. Yeah, Lego. It's like Lego. You just plug things together. Of course, when the time comes to actually flip the switch, you want to make sure you go through and you want to make sure that all the batteries go negative to positive, negative to positive, negative to positive. You don't want the batteries to go, to short circuit and go from positive to positive or something like that. You don't want to short circuit a battery pack when you're getting up into high voltages. Because my battery pack was 144 volts, which is pretty normal, but that could still kill you if you've got it the wrong way. But then, of course, so can playing with a fuel tank full of gas.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, at least with the electric car, you could, in theory, flip the circuit breaker if something goes wrong, or it should do it by itself. It should flip the circuit breaker, or it should blow a fuse by itself to stop any catastrophic disaster. That's a theory, anyway.
So, how much did it cost you to actually convert that car? You mentioned it was $100 and something to buy it, but
the car was the cheap part. The rest of the conversion was cost around about $12,000 in total at the time.
Wow.
That's probably about £16. I don't know what that is in New Zealand's currency conversion. They call the New Zealand dollar the Pacific peso, but it costs about $12,000 and. Unfortunately, part of that was also import taxes because I had to bring in the giant electric motor. What giant? It was about the size of a watermelon. I had to bring that in from the USA and then pay import tax on that. I had to bring in the controller from the USA, again, import tax on that. So a lot of little bits and pieces like the circuit breaker, all of the stuff I had to import from around the world. So you've also got $1,000 worth of shipping costs involved, at least $1,000 for all of those components. So it's harder. It was harder in New Zealand because of the isolation. If you're doing it, I was so jealous watching other converters make their first little steps into the conversions in the USA, for example, because everything there is you pay nothing in shipping. I used to go onto websites and look at component prices and think, oh, I can afford that. And then I select country, New Zealand. Oh, shipping, $650. Oh, God.
Wow.
So
was it just because of the weight?
The weight and the distance. It's New Zealand's a long way, and there's no easy way there's no shortcut to get there.
And obviously, presumably these days you can just buy it from China, and shipping is usually free.
Yeah, you can now. The amount of stuff you can buy. Oh, I wish that was an option back then, but it was the early days of the EV renaissance, and the USA was really my only choice when it came to buying components. And the service I got from the USA was fantastic. I'd happily buy parts again, and I'd love to do another conversion. It sticks in your in your blood. Like, it alters your DNA once you've converted a car, and you unlock the secrets. You realize, my God, that's really quite simple. And you want to do another one. And I'm already, every time I look at some cars, some classic cars, I'm thinking, it's a beautiful car. I wouldn't mind converting that to electric. And I think if I do it again, if I convert another car again, it would be a classic car.
Interesting. There's a quite a big market in the UK for the for conversions,
yes.
Classic conversions.
Yeah,
we have
thanks to the likes of
nearby that does it. I've never been to it. I know of its existence, and it's on my list of places to go to.
I follow a few of them on social media, and some of and of course the electric car show, Fully Charged, follows a lot of these conversions, and some of them are just works of art. Oh, they take Tesla drivetrains and Tesla battery packs, which of course never existed when I was doing my conversion, and they slide those into existing Aston Martins or the original Range Rover SUVs, and they just make these old cars live again. It's beautiful. I'd love to do something like that. And now with the cost of Nissan Leaf packs and Tesla packs, all of these batteries are now flooding the market secondhand out of crashed cars or dismantled cars. The options there now, you can do long range electric cars, more than, say, 100 miles per charge for around about the same price I paid, because you can just buy a dead Nissan Leaf, to harvest the parts out of it, and there you've got an electric car ready to convert. You've got all the components you need for an electric car to convert for 3 times, 4 times the range and performance and levels of comfort than I did, but for the same price.
Interesting. So that's your next business idea then?
People have often asked if there's any money in electric car conversions, and yeah, there is as a business model, but because every car is different. For example, a customer brings in a Porsche 911 and says, I want it to go this far and this fast. And you say, okay, everything, it's possible. We've got the technology, but your engine mounts have to be handmade this way. We have to create a battery bank that fits with this unusual shape of the car's boot. For example, all of these little things. And then the next customer comes in and says, all right, I've got a BMW. I want to convert that. And of course, you've got to do the whole thing starting again. You've got to spend a week designing motor mounts and battery packs and all that to make it fit. And that just means that it's a very expensive business. You can't have, if everyone drove exactly the same car, it would be easy because you could just ready-make kits that drop in and you could drop the price right down. But because every car is different, the cost puts a lot of people off. Unfortunately, it's not easy to make money out of it.
Yeah, it's a very custom job, and obviously you would have to charge people for it. But I'm sure there's enough. Well, I'm not sure about New Zealand, but in the UK and certainly in the USA, there's plenty of interests. And as I see adverts on YouTube, because I watch all sorts of videos, including yours, about conversions, and obviously ads pop up for convert your EV for you. There's loads of businesses.
See, I get different ads on my computer. It keeps telling me there's hot girls in my area. And I live in my area, and I know there are no hot girls here.
Well...
well, that shut you up.
I don't have a good response to that, I'm afraid.
Sorry. Carry on. Back on track.
I live in Britain. Let's just not go there.
Yeah, let's set the safer. You're gonna have people with pitchforks on your doorstep soon.
No, I live in a quiet area.
Okay.
There's too many sad old men with too many motorbikes around here, but that's about it.
Oh, so you've got hot grills in your area instead.
Yeah. So I do have to ask, like how was it driving a fairly small car in Slovakia? Or any
yes.
I started following you after watching your videos, and I distinctly remember one video which just cracked me up, and I still bring it up as a sort of a great sort of humor. I think you drove to Austria or Germany and back, and you were so peed off about the public charging infrastructure. I remember at the end of the video, you showed up dressed up in your suit.
Yeah.
You made a statement about or an appeal to companies about charges, and it was just amazing. It just cracked me up.
This is going back must be about 5 years ago now, and of course, the electric car revolution was underway. I had an electric car. It was one of the Mitsubishi i-MiEV clones, a Peugeot Ion, and I decided to take it on its first road trip from Bratislava in Slovakia across to Vienna in Austria, which, for those that don't know, might sound like, wow, how far away is that? It's a long way. No, it's only about 60 kilometers. It's like, they're called the twin cities. Bratislava and Vienna are sister cities, right, or side-by-side cities. And so I thought, okay, that'll be a piece of cake. So I thought, I drove over there fairly normally, and I had a card that apparently worked with the blossoming network that was just installed, a new fast charger just installed over in Vienna outside of Burger King. So I went over there, and I went over there to buy some salty Dutch licorice, because it's really hard to find for obvious reasons. No one likes it. So I went to buy some because I like the stuff, because I was raised on it. And then I went to, of course, the store was closed because it was the Saint Sausage Day or whatever public holiday. The stores are always closed in Austria. So I gave up, and I thought, well, I'll just go home. I'll go on quick charge and I'll head home. So I went to the charger and plugged the car in, waved my card in front of it, and it said, "Nein, you are not activated," and it wouldn't let me charge the car. And this started an hour on my phone with the phone battery gradually descending. Oops, sorry, that noise was my phone. So this started an hour of struggle trying to contact someone behind the charging system. This was a Sunday, I think, as well. And I was calling every phone number on the page, and no one could help me on the website for the charger. No one knew anything about it. I said, no, I don't. I know nothing at all, nine. And so they weren't helpful at all. Sorry, my Austrian accent is really camp. I have to apologise in advance.
It's very good. It's very good.
Yeah, to any Austrians watching this or listening to this, it's terrible. I'm sorry. But anyway, I managed to finally get a hold of someone, and someone in control, and they said that charger's not in their system. They couldn't connect to it, so they couldn't even turn it on for me. But they gave me directions to a slow charger a few kilometres away in an underground car park. So I nursed the car that only had a couple of bars of electricity left. I nursed it to this underground car park. Finally, there's a car parked in the space where the charger was, of course, a gas car. And so I managed to typically, that was my first icing experience where a car blocks the charger. And so I managed to, just by parking right up against close to this other car, I managed to just reach the charging point and plug the car in on a slow charger. But of course, it had to be full to get home. So it meant that I had to pay for €4 an hour for almost 4 hours for the car to charge in the slow space while I wandered around aimlessly in Vienna, which was a nice problem, I guess. But then I finally got enough. I got to above 3/4 full, and then I drove home back to Bratislava. But I encountered one of those summer evening storms, which meant you had horizontal rain and a strong headwind pushing back. And I finally got to the fast charge across the border in Slovakia on turtle mode just before the car had run out, and that got me so angry that it was like 2017 at the time, or 2016 at the time. Electric cars, if car makers and recharging networks want them to take off, they have to be as easy to use as gas stations. So I put on a suit and I put the camera in the garage aiming at myself, because I thought, well, this is a serious message. I'm going to wear a suit for this. So I put a tie on, even though it was the middle of summer, and I stared at the camera and I told the electric car service providers or charging providers, if you guys want electric cars to take off, it's got to be as easy as a gas station, where anywhere in the world you can drive in. You don't need a membership card. You just drive into a gas station, you pay by credit card, and you fill up and you drive away. And it's got to be that easy. Don't make us sign up for membership cards and rewards programs and all this junk. Just let me drive in, put in my credit card details like you can with modern gas station pumps. You don't even go inside anymore. You just pull up, you put your card in front, you enter in your PIN number, and you fill up. We've got the technology. There's no reason why they couldn't do it with electricity. And finally, 3-4 years later, that's finally beginning to happen. But it shouldn't have taken that long.
Yeah, I agree. Well, here in the UK, we only have one network that.
Oh, really?
That does that.
I see.
There are some chargers that have sort of added a contactless charger to it, so a contactless card thingy.
Like credit card.
Yeah. So you can I don't know what you guys call it in New Zealand, but I think it's called contactless in the UK. It's like Wave something, Wave Pass, or
they call it Pay Wave here, and it's it's contactless in Slovakia. But yeah, they've got different names, but it's a great service. It's just a wave your card in front of it.
But there's only one charger. I can't remember the network name, but that's the only way you can pay for it. Basically, okay. I'm sure they have for their employees and all that, they have RFID tags. But as a sort of Joe Public, that's the only way for you to pay for it. You just wave your card at it to start the charge, and then wave it to end the charge. That's it.
I foresee it's how it's going to be in the future. I can't see, like in the beginning, in the early days when maybe, for example, the UK had 1,000 electric cars on its road. Yeah, sure, have RFID tags, sign up for membership and all that stuff. But now, as people are, there are shortages of electric cars from makers that have underestimated batteries and things like that, and now they've got waiting times for people to buy their cars. People aren't going to want to have to sign up before they use a charger. You don't have to sign up to Shell or BP before you go and fill up your car. People are just going to want to just go in there and we're busy. We've got to go pick up the kids and got to go and set dogs on fire and all the stuff you're busy. You got to go and do. So you don't have time to go and sign up for membership cards. So I foresee that's how it's going to be. Just wave your card in front of it, no membership, pay, charge, drive away.
Yep. There's so many obstacles in the way of EV adoption, and we don't want charging to be one of them.
Absolutely.
We went to me and my wife. We went to New Zealand in November last year.
Oh, really?
Because I always wanted to go. It was our honeymoon, so we just picked New Zealand as a destination. We travelled all over, basically from the north to the south. And I've seen quite a few chargers, but I would imagine living with an EV in New Zealand must be pretty hard unless you have Tesla sort of range, because I haven't seen that many rapid chargers. There was plenty of Leiths around Auckland sort of area, and Queenstown.
There are a lot of Leafs around, but you don't see them out on the open road much. They are just city cars, like most cars. They are just doing go to work, go to school, pick up the kids, go to the supermarket, like most cars. But if you want to go long range, you have to take an Ioniq or a Hyundai Kona or Tesla or one of those. Yeah, the less Leafs are just city cars.
Yeah, we've seen actually quite a few Ioniqs with what seemed like a government sort of
emblems on the side.
On the side. Is that something that the New Zealand government does, or is that like a local initiative? Do you know anything about it?
I don't know much about the government itself, but local governments like city councils and things are really putting a lot of money into electric cars. I saw last year, I think it was, I saw the Auckland City Council. I stumbled upon a car park full, like literally full. There must have been 30 Ioniqs, brand new electric, just sitting there ready to drive. They must have just been delivered. And it was like stumbling across a pot of gold, or like when you unlock a secret level in a game. It's just like, what? You do a double take and think, hang on, are they all electric? And I wandered up and down thinking, my God, they're all electric. I've never seen so many electric cars in one place. So yeah, the local governments do seem to be getting on board. Because yes, it's an expensive initial purchase price, but overall, it is cheaper to run. Of course, it's cleaner as well. But overall, what councils typically care about is cost. And they are cheaper to run. They cost essentially nothing to run.
Yeah, and especially since it's driven by people who don't own the car. It's not even the fuel that costs, but it's the maintenance. When people treat cars like they usually do cars that they don't own.
Exactly, you've got it. Yep.
They put so much stress on them. Like there's an old Polish joke that went basically. I'm trying to remember it now. Basically,
I love it so far.
yeah. The only car that can mount any curb is a company car. I think it's something like that.
I mean, think about the last time you hired a car. Especially when you were younger. Did you mother it and care for it as if it was your own? Of course you didn't.
Yeah, but yeah, we drove the car in New Zealand pretty hard.
Yeah,
and it was a gas car, and unfortunately, because we couldn't get a Tesla. I looked for a Tesla rentals in New Zealand, and there weren't any. Like I couldn't find any that would let me take a car for 3 weeks. You can rent some electric cars,
but not Teslas.
Sorry?
Yeah. You can rent some electric cars in New Zealand. There are some services, but not Teslas.
No. And obviously, to do a trip from the north to the south, it's... I don't know how many miles we've done, but it must have been thousands. And we couldn't have done that in an EV. I've driven, because I have a 30 kilowatt-hour Nissan Leaf, and I've driven from it. I've driven it from where I live in Tunbridge, in Kent, all the way to Edinburgh, then Glasgow and back. And that from here to Edinburgh is about 700 miles. That's cool. I don't know how many kilometers that is, but that's over 1,000. And it takes quite a long time in a regular quote unquote car. It took me about 12 hours with all the stops, because obviously, you can't drive that long without any stops. Like, it's just mad.
This Robert Llewellyn, who runs Fully Charged, I interviewed him a few weeks ago, and he came up with a great term, bladder range. Because, of course, we all talk about the cars range, but bladder range. Yeah, there's only so far you can go before the meat bag behind the steering wheel turns out to be the problem, not the car.
Yeah, I think in my case it's about 2.5 hours.
Okay, that's your bladder range.
Yeah, and 2.5 hours, incidentally, is about how far my car can drive on the motorway without stopping.
Okay, that's pretty good. And that's just a 30 kilowatt hour pack.
Yes, yeah.
That's very good. 2.5 hours is good. I think with the first generation Leaf, you'd be lucky to get more than an hour.
Well, yeah. Well, this is the first generation, but obviously higher capacity battery.
Right.
Because the original one was 24 kilowatt hour.
That's right. Yeah. So I'm actually putting together this very week. I'm putting together a buyer's guide for Nissan Leafs, because there's so much information out there about the Nissan Leaf, but all of it about the new models, of course, because that's what the newspapers write about. They write, the latest model. They do write-ups of the latest models. That's normal. That's how it works. But there's no buyer's guides out there for used Nissan Leafs for those people on tiny budgets like mine who want to get into the electric vehicle game, but are just a little bit uncertain. How do I tell if the battery's good? What do I look for? What about design flaws or anything like that? And there's just nothing out there. There's some web pages, but there's no videos out there going through the car step by step. So that's something I've been working on this week, which should be hopefully really good fun.
That would be interesting. So what do you drive these days?
At the moment I'm driving possibly the most sophisticated and stylish automotive machine humanity's ever created. I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that. It is the pinnacle of human achievement. It is a 2001 Hyundai Accent. I may have embellished a little. It's absolute crap, but it works. And it's just a stepping stone. Once I left Slovakia, I came back to New Zealand, and I just needed a basic set of wheels before I figure out what's happening next in my life and where I'm going. And I didn't want to invest $10,000 in buying a used Nissan Leaf, so I thought, well, I'll just buy a $2,000 gas clunker, and that is serving me until one day I send it off to the big Hyundai yard in the sky. But at the moment, this week, I'm actually I'm borrowing a used Nissan Leaf because I needed it it was offered to me by a really nice guy, and I need it to make this Leaf video as well. So, but this afternoon, I'm going to be dropping it off and picking up my stylish and sexy 2001 Hyundai, and it has moss, so it's eco-friendly.
Ooh, it's green.
It's got some moss growing on the window. Green. It's literally green. It's already biodegrading.
So I would imagine. So my sort of first experience in New Zealand, when we got off the plane in Auckland, actually, was. I looked around and everything looked. I looked at the cars, obviously, because that's the first thing you usually see at the airport. it looked to me like I've been to an Asian country, specifically Japan.
Yep.
With all this sort of squarey, boxy vans and, all these sort of cars that look very much, cars in there's a lot of cars that you can buy in Europe that are Japanese, but they do different trims for Asian market. Like everything's kind of, I don't know, more skirty. I don't know how to explain it, but everything kind of runs down a little bit more. And these are the sort of cars that I've seen in New Zealand. So I presume there's a lot of, when you buy a car that's sort of like a Nissan, presumably it comes from a Japanese market. And I presume there's loads of second-hand Leafs currently on sale in Japan. So I'm guessing that's where the cars usually come from, right? When you buy them in New Zealand.
Absolutely. Most of the electric cars in New Zealand, if not most of the cars in New Zealand that the average person is driving around, are used Japanese imports. There are most of the electric cars are used Japanese imports, and most of those are Nissan Leafs. And the majority of Nissan Leafs are used Japanese imports. There are a tiny handful that were made for the New Zealand market and were sold here brand new. But most of them are second-hand, and there are a handful also that are used British Nissan Leafs that were shipped down here because steering wheels also on the correct side, and there's nothing fancy needed. But the great majority are used Japanese Nissan Leafs, which, like the one I'm borrowing, means that a lot of the buttons are in Japanese, that the dashboard display is all in Japanese, and the stereo and GPS and everything, all that's in Japanese. And every day you start the car, the thing says "Konnichiwa" and then goes on to a spiel about six seconds long in Japanese, and I have no idea what it's saying, but it's probably good news.
Interesting, because my Leaf doesn't say anything, and it only just made a sound when it was new, but I turned it off because after a while you just fed up with it. And one of my first YouTube videos about my car was just me reviewing this or going through the sounds and actually showing users where it is. And I think I've got something like, I can't remember how many views, but it's probably one of my most popular videos ever.
Right.
It's just, I get loads of awful comments from other people just saying that the sounds sound very childish, which I do have to agree. They sound very, I don't know what's the word, like they sound Japanese basically. They do. Is the way to put it. But my car never spoke to me, so.
No, a lot of people, like, obviously this is a common problem in New Zealand, the talking Japanese cars, not just Nissan Leafs either. A lot of cars, the Japanese, they put every gadget they can think of it, like the Americans. They just throw any gadget imaginable in there, from electric seats to heated mirrors and all the stuff you'd expect in the top end car, surround sound, reversing cameras. All that stuff the Japanese throw in their seats, in their cars. I'm thinking vibrating seats as well. They put that stuff in, but it just means that a lot of the cars do talk. And at first, I was thinking, well, this is getting annoying because I've had the car for over a week now. But as the time goes on, I like the car talking to me in Japanese when I turn it on. And I found that there's other Leaf owners are the same in New Zealand. At first, it got on their tits, on their nerves, and then after a while, they start to realize, actually, I kind of like this car yabbering at me in Japanese. It's just, sometimes it's a little disconcerting because, like yesterday, driving on the motorway, just driving home, and then the car barks at me in Japanese, and I wasn't doing anything, so I don't know if it was important or not. But
hopefully it didn't say, you're about to run out of battery, just...
No, well, I looked down at the dashboard in fear, thinking, well, what? Is the battery too hot? No, the range is fine. What did that mean? And it just adds to the variety of life.
Can you not change it to English at all?
You can. I don't know if you can change the speech to English, but you can turn it off. There is a way to turn it off, which I've decided I don't want to. First of all, it's not my car. Secondly, I kind of like the random Japanese. It's just adds. It's like some pepper on life. It adds to the variety of life. But you can change the dashboard and the head unit and all that to English. There are some guys in New Zealand that do that, but the pricing could be around $500 or $600 to do it, which is, you have to ask yourself if it's worth it.
Yeah. Do you want to keep a secret Asian girlfriend, or do you want to, teach her English? I suppose...
Well, I mean, we've all got secret Asian girlfriends.
Interesting. Is it a 30 kilowatt hour or 24 kilowatt hour?
24.
Leaf?
I was given the option of a couple of Leafs to borrow, and I chose the 24 because I wanted to make the buyer's guide about that model, because that's the model which is the most prevalent in New Zealand. That's the model that has, which are on the dealer lots the most. That's the 24 kilowatt hour model is the one where most Kiwis are thinking, hey, I want to buy an electric car, but I don't have a lot of money. That's the one they're going to go for. So that's the one I wanted to make the guide about. Yes, I could have made a buyer's guide for the 30 kilowatt hour pack or the new 40 kilowatt hour pack, but those are out of the price range of most Kiwis. So I went for the one that's flooded the market. How to find a good one of those. And I'm really hoping that video will be popular, because I've spent a week working on it. And if it's a complete flop, then, well, I'll just go and hug my pillow, rock back and forwards and cry myself to sleep. But if it's a great success, that would be wonderful. I hope people share it and find it useful.
Well, I'm going to definitely share it. And, if anyone wants to watch your videos, I'm sure they're not going to be disappointed. That's all I'm going to say. So the year we live in now, 2019, is very interesting, because there were loads of cars that were supposed to come out in 2019 or being available in 2019.
Yeah.
And obviously 2020 is like the year of EV. Everyone has been saying that they're going to release things in 2020, but the trouble that I'm having with 2019 is that all the cars coming out are either very expensive because they're new, or they're just luxury cars that, there's loads of automakers that are trying to get grab a bit of market back from Tesla, but they're still not appealing to like a Joe Blog like myself, who's not willing to spend 65-70 grand on a car. And yeah, I could probably, but that would mean a divorce, and I would have to live in that car.
Yeah.
And I like my wife. So, but interestingly, at least in the UK, the second-hand market, EV market, is blossoming. There are cars that, like my car, is still worth pretty much the same amount of money on the second-hand market as it was sort of last year. And some of the cars actually, like the one you used to own in Slovakia, that car is now, pretty... I don't know what the exact price is, but the prices are on the staying on the same level. They, it's not a car that you would think anyone would be willing to buy these days, but there's still a huge market for those cars, because people are realizing, okay, well, we have two cars as a family, let's just say, and we don't want to. One of them is kind of wives round, and we don't want to be paying through the nose for it. Let's just buy an EV. And more and more people own EVs, so the sort of the message gets through. There's still a giant sort of opposition, at least in the UK, for EVs.
It's ingrained. It's an emotional thing. It's not a logical thing. It's just an emotional thing. You like for example, I took my neighbour. He's a great guy. I took him out for a blast. He'd never been in an electric car, so I took him around the block in a Nissan Leaf, and I think he was interested. It's like, oh yeah, okay, that's interesting. But he definitely wasn't convinced, and that's going to take a lot of it's going to take a lot of persuasion. What's going to make the difference is the cost. Yes, there's the environmental benefit. Yes, there's the noise. Yes, there's pollution. But I hate to say it, but it's true. We only think about the money. So once those cars do come down in price, then we're going to see, and it's already happening, we're going to see those people that said, oh, the electric cars just aren't there yet. I hate that phrase. They aren't there yet, whatever that means. Now those sort of people are slow. Some of those people are now buying cars. A family friend, when I did the conversion, he used to poo-poo the idea, he'd mock it and say, oh, they'll never catch on. It's just a joke, And last time I saw him, late last year, he said, you know what, you were right. Oh yeah, I want to buy one of those Nissan Leafs now. So it's happening. It's happening.
I sadly in my sort of close circle, it's not as popular of an idea still. I get loads of in the family and sort of around my external sort of friends and friends of friends. They're all still very Like even my wife wasn't quite convinced. She was happy for me to, because I usually drive, not her. She was happy for me to buy whatever I'm comfortable with.
Right.
But she wasn't convinced initially. At least I didn't get that sort of vibe. But now she's an EV advocate. Obviously, we're very practical. Like when people ask, we know the downsides. There are downsides. Yeah. It's just like with everything. But the upsides, in my own opinion, just are overwhelmingly just crashing the downsides. Like I'm happy to stop every 2 hours for half an hour and just relax. I just drive in a different way. And that doesn't mean slow, not most of the time anyway.
That's the thing. Yeah, it's
the sort of the also association that we have as a civilization or generations of people before us, associate the noise with fun. It's just very hard to explain to everybody or to most people that I come across that these two things are not related to each other. You can have plenty of fun in a car that's absolutely silent, not quiet, but it's much more quiet than a petrol or diesel car. And and that's coming from a guy who I wouldn't say I love the noise, but I love the sort of the noise that you control. I often compare people who rev their cars at lights or happy to drive through a highway, the high street in a town, revving up their cars to an amateur guitar players who they're in love with their own noise, but they're the only people who are in love with their own noise. Everybody else is not quite amazed by it. And there isn't anything behind it.
Pretty accurate.
So that's my sort of an analogy. As a poor guitar player, I can relate. How's the second-hand market in New Zealand then?
Booming.
For EVs, obviously.
Absolutely booming. When I did my first conversion back in 2007, I think I got it road legal in 2008. There were around about 20 electric cars registered on the roads in New Zealand. Wow. If that, maybe 15. And they were also either conversions or they were electric motorbikes or things like that. There was really nothing there. However, today, I think a couple of months ago, we just crossed over 12,000 electric cars registered on the nation's roads, and almost every single one of those is a used Japanese import. Because, of course, Japan, they have subsidies, so they get these cars at a more affordable price, the buyers there. And then I believe after a car reaches a certain age, I might be wrong, but I believe in Japan that it becomes quite expensive to register the car after it becomes a certain age, which for us is still a new car, still relatively new, but for the Japanese it's it's old, it's time to flick it off. So those cars end up in a lot of countries that drive on the left. So New Zealand's one example. We end up with bucket loads of these cheap cars that come down, and it just means the market's flooded. There's a car dealership just down the road, just in the suburb I live in. It's a kilometre away, if that. And they must have about 20 Generation 1 24 kilowatt hour Nissan Leafs on their lot. And I went and I spoke to the owner last week and asked him, is business going? Is it business going well? And he said that if it wasn't, I wouldn't be doing this. He was just, it's just can't keep up. There are just people who desperately want electric cars. They're just sick of paying for gas. And then they now know from friends, like you say, people they know who have electric cars. The word is spreading, and they just want to get behind the wheel and stop paying for gas. Most importantly, the ecological benefits are a byproduct for them. For most of them, they just want to stop buying gas and paying for expensive stuff. And the only fear is the car okay? Is it any good? Is the battery going to die tomorrow? That's the fear that's stopping people from doing it. Of course, the cost is still high. You're still looking, even the cheapest electric car, if you can find one, you might get a bargain for $9,000, which is probably around £4,000, I guess, maybe a little less.
It's about half. Yeah.
So you might find a bargain, but then of course, how do you know if the battery's okay? That comes back to the whole point. The reason I'm making this video coming up to show first-time EVers who maybe maybe know a little bit about the Leaf. It's not going to be a crash course on who created the Leaf, who designed it, when it came out, and all that. There is a little mention of that, but it's basically just a buyer's guide how to find a good one. And with the market as it is right now, flooded with Nissan Leafs, it's a great time to go electric because you've got the choice. And actually, something interesting I saw a couple of days ago. The head of the Motor Trade Association in Australia, in Queensland in Australia, went on stage a few days ago and said that there is no future in gas and diesel vehicles. And this is the guy. This organisation oversees car dealers and service stations, and he's gone on stage and said there's no future in gas vehicles. That's got to tell you something. If he says that, that's got to tell you something. And this is why I went on Twitter and I said that, I'm not a market analyst, but if he's saying stuff like that, maybe it's time to sell your gas or diesel car now while it's still got a little value. Because within the next 5 years, I foresee gas and diesel cars are just going to plummet. Because who's going to want them? When in 5 years from now, we're going to have long-range second-hand electric cars available. Who's going to want to go out and spend, yes, I want to do the same range, but I want the car to be noisy and smelly and very expensive to maintain. No one. They're just going to plummet.
Yep, I obviously agree. There's a big reason why so many people are buying second-hand EVs in the UK, and there's more and more small businesses coming up that just basically either lease them or rent them, and they usually buy second-hand Leafs just for city running. It's very amazing. Like it's just I'm always surprised that these things are very slow, but I think what's happening is the like you've mentioned that there's a shortage of EVs, new EVs, affordable EVs. I don't think that's the case. I think I wouldn't say that the car manufacturers are that silly and they didn't know that there's going to be demand for electric cars in 2019. I think what happened is that they've spent so much money on research and development of the petrol and diesel cars and platforms. I actually previous episode of Take It EV was my rant about hybrids and how self-charging hybrids and all that nonsense is just like a 20-year-old story that's just it's not going away for some reason. But there's so much money that car manufacturers spend on developing the platform that they build the cars on that and they set out the roadmaps probably 10 years ago for whatever they're selling now, that they cannot. They want to recoup the money they put in the R&D of those and engineering, and they just cannot say, okay, well, because with such a high demand and such a great range of, let's just say Hyundai Kona, 64 kilowatt-hour battery, 300-mile range. That's a car like. When I bought my car 3 and a bit years ago, everyone was saying, 100 miles is not enough, blah, blah, blah. I need something that can do 250 miles because X, Y, Z. And I could agree. 200 miles is like a sweet spot. You don't have to worry about, most of journeys. Because it's, in the UK, if you use motorways, it will take you about 3.5, 4 hours to drive 250 miles. On the motorway, and obviously that's at the legal speed and all that. Which is an awful long time going back to the bladder range. It's just you're not going to spend that long in a car anyway. But the Hyundai, if they were led purely by market forces, as kind of perceived by an average Joe, they would just say, okay, well, we're going to stop selling petrol and diesel Hyundais or Konas. We're just going to from now on just sell electric ones because the range is such that there's no. We have all these other cars in the range. They can be petrol, diesel, but this particular range is just going to go fully electric. But they're not doing that. I think it's just it's all purpose. It's just they've obviously knew that that they just want to have a sort of show the taste of it to people, but they don't want to cannibalize their own petrol and diesel.
Absolutely,
platforms.
This is, I think, with 90 8% or 99% of all car makers. It's a case of, when it comes to, of course, like you say, they've invested billions and set out roadmaps for internal combustion plans and profits from that technology. And then, of course, they come along with this electric version, which can do the same range per charge, but doesn't use any parts or pulleys and all that, and effectively could be a loss for them. Where's the incentive to switch over, to throw all that research money away and switch over to electric? So they don't. That's why car makers have taken so long to sell the electric models, because to promote the electric models, because there's still so much money left in internal combustion. All the parts and all those aftermarket sales and service and all those genuine parts that have to be installed in those cars. There's so much cash to be made out of them, and unfortunately, it just means that electric gets put on the back burner. And it's not until cars like manufacturers like Tesla came out and completely changed everything we knew about electric cars, or everything we thought we knew about electric cars. Suddenly, electric cars are sexy again. Whereas gas car makers, like the big auto, it almost seems as though they'd gone and talked to their designers and said, right, we need to make an electric car, make it good, but not too good. That just seems to be what the modus operandi for gas car makers over the last decade. Make it good, but not too good. And Tesla's come along and said, make it good, full stop.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of benefits from hybrids. But we had hybrids for 20 odd years. It's you would expect sort of natural. There's again, I rumbled about it, but it just appease me off this subject, because there are architectures, different hybrid architectures, and one of them that is like the best one in my opinion, and it's been tested, and and it's the simplest one that I can think of, is if you think about BMW i3 with the range extender, which they don't make anymore, sadly. That sort of architecture where you have a medium-sized battery, which you can scale up and down, and a little petrol motor in the back with that's tuned to work very well with a certain RPM range, and just top up the battery. That's like the perfect hybrid architecture or range extender architecture. And cars like that have been developed over 10 years ago, where the batteries were, back then batteries were obviously much more expensive. So you would expect, if the reason was and the fun to drive was the primary goal of every car manufacturer in the world, this would be natural platform for them to pick up, because obviously electric is just there is no contest when it comes to torque. Like it's just by all sort of accounts, mine and many people that I know who love fast cars, you just can't go wrong with electric. You've got an instant response from the throttle. You just
absolutely
go. And I'm sure you would agree. I would love to be proven wrong, but I just in my Nissan Leaf I can smoke pretty much any other car on the road straight off from the stop line, because it's got that instant torque.
I don't know if you're the same, but I find myself when I'm watching shows like the Grand Tour, which which used to be Top Gear in some ways. Whenever they're test driving the new Lamborghini or the new Aston Martin, and they said this one has a blistering 0 to 100 in 3.9 seconds, and in my mind I'm constantly thinking, oh, so it's almost as fast as the family sedan Tesla Model S.
Precisely. Like I've been saying, my wife's obviously rolling her eyes every time I say that, but I always say, if I said to her, look, if I ever have money to buy this, like a Lamborghini or whatever, and I do buy it, please remind me to buy like 2 or 3 Model S's instead.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Because I back in the day when I was younger and I worked in research and development for the various companies, I knew loads of rich people, and I know from their honest sort of stories that those cars are utterly expensive to like maintain.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's not fun, basically. Like it's a sort of fun thing to, it's like an antique where you pick up and you're like, oh, I'm afraid to break this because it's so expensive, and and it's useless because it's just meh. So you just take it out for a short run, a spin every so often, that's it.
Yeah,
I would love to see somebody doing hundreds of miles in a Lamborghini, whatever, across the country, like on daily basis. It's not a utilitarian car.
It's not. It's a showpiece. It's a trinket.
Exactly. Exactly.
And by all means, some of them are really beautiful looking machines, but they are just they're not. They're not practical cars, but then again, the people that buy them, they know that they're buying them because they're buying them for that prestige, that wow factor, and for a lot of the time for the attention.
Oh yeah. There's no other way about it. Like, you're gonna attract loads of people. Most of them are going to be rolling their eyes and thinking, "What a such and such," but but you're still going to get people's attention. But yet, if you buy something like a Model S, you can buy a P100D Ludicrous, and day to day it's obviously quiet, so you can drive your mum to church. But at the same time, if you just want to have fun, you press a button and you just go. And I've test driven Ludicrous Model S, and it blew my mind. It just blew my mind.
It is out of this world. There's no other way to explain it. It hurts. The acceleration in that car hurts.
And even somebody like Jeremy Clarkson, who's a top person, I'm not going to swear.
A high-profile person who is not a fan of electric vehicles.
I'm just going to use a T word for anyone who wants to look it up. But it's just, he was amazed by the Model X. He was. He said something like a 2-ton machine that can do 0 to 100 in like 100 kilometers, or 0 to 60 in here in 2 whatever seconds. He was blown away. And
I also wonder if his change of tune regarding the Tesla car was possibly because he's seen the figures. He's seen how well these things are selling, how much people want them, how much they're revered in the public eye. Maybe he realised that actually it is probably best to get on the right side of history here, and maybe that's why he's changed his tune a little bit.
Well, I don't think he's the Top Gear is as a sort of entertainment show. I wouldn't get your facts from it. It's obviously presented.
Oh well, no, you and I know that. But at the same time, people do take a lot of it as gospel.
Sadly, yes. But you just have to know that it's it's all stage, or most of it. It's just purely fun show. To watch, like, entertainment value of it was when they were on the show was amazing. But at the same time, I don't think a person like a Jeremy Clarkson is necessarily somebody who day to day is a very sort of big, reasonable advocate of sort of amazing things like that. Like, he's been brought up in an era where you had to have a fastest and loudest thing, and he's obviously, I don't want to badmouth him too much, but he was brought up in a wealthy family, so he had access from the young age to exquisite cars and all that. So he didn't have to, like, the sort of the simplest utilitarian options that we have as sort of average person with a medium income were just not a problem to him. He could, as a child or sort of teenager, his family could afford to buy him whatever he wanted. So he obviously went for loud and fast. But I was still amazed that he was blown away by Tesla. He had a lot. I love the sense of humor this guy has. Like the fact that he packed the car with
lawyers.
It's just
great.
Amazing. Like, as he's a massive douche, but But at the same time, I have to give him credit for just.
I feel sorry. As far as I can tell, his persona. That's why I don't hate the guy, because I'm aware that his persona is manufactured. He's the whole thing, the whole Jeremy Clarkson, best in the world, all that. It's all manufactured. It's for television. Yes, there must be some truth to it in his personal life, but I don't think he runs around burning liberals and things like that. I think it's all just manufactured to get a bit of a rise out of people. Unfortunately, some people do. They take the bait.
Yeah, well, he did punch somebody in a restaurant, which is just a bit of an outrageous thing to do. But again, I think he was brought up spoiled, and it's showing. But his sense of humor, like as much as I just hate that sort of thing, but I don't know if you watched the episode where he reviewed, was it Ford ST or Ford Focus or something like that? And he drove it around the shopping mall.
And took it off a landing craft on a beach. Oh, yes. My gosh. And then, that was so absurd, but it was hilarious.
It was hilarious. And again, this was all staged. Like, it's not something...
absolutely, yeah.
I would love to see the outtakes of that, like the number of times...
and the behind-the-scenes
I'm sure there were at least 5 cars that he crashed.
Must have, surely. That one that went off the landing craft into the sea, that's a write-off immediately. If it survived, get rid of it. It's dead, yeah.
But how many cars Ford actually sold because of that is just another story.
It's unbeatable PR.
I loved his sense of humour when he said, "And is this car green?" And then obviously he's showing a green car.
It's a green car.
They knew he was going to say that because he was driving a green car all along. Yeah. And my other favourite moment in Top Gear, again, this is something like I don't see anyone else. Like, if I had, a budget, I would do the same thing. But when he was testing an audio equipment in one of the other cars, and he had Eric Clapton playing guitar through the speakers of the car to test it out.
Yes, I remember that.
It was amazing. Like I was just like, wow, that's just I just love I love them for these sort of moments, but everything else is obviously rubbish. Like, why would you show me a Lamborghini, whatever? Like, who cares?
I admit that as much as I love cars, anyone who knows me knows I love cars. I do prefer quirky and unusual / accessible cars. I'd much rather go and poke around at a 1980 Honda Prelude than a 1980 Lamborghini Countach or whatever. It's just this... I don't know what it is, but I find that the little accessible cars are so much more fascinating for me. Because I've had I have a connection with them. I have no real interest in Lamborghinis or exotic supercars. They're visually appealing, but I don't have any connection to them. I don't feel much when I look at them. In fact, I was never really much for new cars. I never had any new cars that stirred my soul until I saw the Tesla, the Model S, when that came out, and I thought, hello, that's new. That stirs something inside me I hadn't experienced before with a new car. So, which that's a great sign of the times.
Yeah, it was loads of fun. Thank you very much for appearing on Take It EV.
It has been my pleasure, and I wish you much success, and may your hips be shapely and your cars be electric.
All right, folks, that's it in today's episode, and thank you for listening.
Greg, it has been a pleasure starring on Take It EV.
As always, your feedback is greatly appreciated. Do get in touch on Facebook or Twitter. It's facebook.com/TakeItEV or @TakeItEV on Twitter. And just, if you see me anywhere else, just stop by and say hello. Thank you very much. See ya.